Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Seventh Man Podcast. I'm Will Beverina. I run Dimer2K.com and write about the NBA 2K League.
I am Josiah Cohen, and I write about the NBA 2K League for Dimer2K.com.
And I'm Len, and I write for Dimer 2K about the NBA 2K League as well.
Yeah, if you didn't catch our last episode, we got Jordan Ross, aka Len, on the podcast now. Naturally, since he's on the Dimer team, he will be on the Dimer podcast. Make sure you give him a follow at Len_2K. We're back for episode 18. You can check out all of our previous episodes on our YouTube channel. Just search for the Seventh Man Podcast. And we have most of our episodes on iTunes, Podbean, and now Spotify as well. So last time on the pod, we talked about the tip-off. We didn't have a podcast last week, and that's basically my fault because I lost my voice due to playoff hockey, which happens to the best of us. But
Good thing
we're
we're getting
back,
this
and
out the way tonight. Oh boy, let's not
yes,
talk about it.
uh,
Well, Game 7.
I I have the game on in the background while I'm doing this, but we are back, and we are here to talk about Week 2 of the NBA 2K League and do a slight preview of Week 3. Now, generally, when we did this during the season last year, Josiah and I broke down a few games in depth and then kind of quickly run through the rest. This time, we're going to have broader topics of discussion, which will hopefully keep things a little fresh and keep things concise as well now that we have three people on here. We're gonna try to keep it under an hour, around an hour at the very least. So hopefully we can pull that off. First order of business, fellas, let's talk about Blazer 5. Why not? I feel like even though this was a team, they were a first seed last year, they had two MVP candidates. They were kind of a bit forgotten, I feel like, in the grand scheme of things, especially with the loss of shots in the offseason and a lot of teams quickly building up a lot of talent through the draft. They had a close loss to the Bucks last week. That was a double overtime game. Then they came back in week 2 with two big wins over the Warriors and Lakers. Mama and Walnut both look like they have not missed a beat, had fantastic weeks. Where do you think Blazer 5 Gaming stands, Josiah? Do you think they're being overlooked?
Yeah, I actually do think they are. And I'm not usually one to say that sort of thing, but with two MVP candidates who are back in fine form and Mamba really playing himself into the top three in MVP consideration, I think the Blazers are being absolutely overlooked right now.
What do you think, Len?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that. What, they go 2-0 last week. I mean, they've only really lost to the Bucks and twice now, but the Bucks, they've proven to be a real contender thus far. So initially, I think the first loss to the Bucks, everyone's like, oh, maybe the Blazers aren't as good as they are, but I think it turns out that the Bucks are actually better than what people originally thought. So yeah, I mean, I think people are down on the Blazers. There's still a couple things as far as like team defense and things of that sort. I'd like to see them get better at, but I mean, as long as Mama and Walnut are producing at the levels they are, I mean, you have to take them serious for sure.
Yeah, I think that like them not making out of the group stage of the tip off like is kind of what set all of this in motion. So you don't make the knockouts and then you lose your first game of the week. So you're looking at a team that's 0-1, and you're looking at a team that lost to the Bucks and couldn't get out of their group, which I think is kind of what led to all this. Uh, I think the big thing as well is everyone kind of expected that they would have to replace Shots' production. And they went out and got a guy like King Peroxide in the offseason to try and do that, right? They wanted a guy to be a third option. Well, looking at their two games in week 2, they had very balanced scoring efforts. In their first game against the Warriors, one player, I can't remember who, I want to say Peroxide maybe, came up 1 point short of everyone on the team having double-digit scoring. And then against the Lakers, everyone on the team had double-digit scoring. With the way Walnut and Mama are playing, does this team like actually need a third option to replace Shots?
Well, I think that goes hand in hand with why the Blazers are overlooked. I think a lot of people presupposed what the meta would be, right? And that running straight pick and roll for the most part would be a successful but a successful tactic, but one that would not reach the same heights that it did last season, where the Knicks especially used that to their great advantage. Um, but yeah, no, I think the Blazers are right in there. That balance scoring is going to be useful. I don't think they need to replace shots. If you have the absolute best pick and roll tandem in the league, and again, that's not saying that necessarily they are. You have to look at Radiant and Steez as well in that conversation, and no doubt others that I'm forgetting and will laugh at me on Twitter. But I think if you have that firing on all cylinders, then that will create the other scoring opportunities in, yes, this very different meta where you don't need to replace a player of Shots' caliber with exactly the same type or statistics of a player.
I mean, well, for me, I would say like with this, it's yet to be seen as far as like will they need a third person because the best the best team they faced, they've played them twice in the Bucks. They weren't able to beat them, and it does make you question. Okay, to beat a team like that who literally has three guys who can produce on offense, maybe four, you could argue about. It does make you question, okay, against the teams who do have third options on offense, will they need that down the line? But yeah, I mean, I agree as far as being taken serious, that their pick and roll and Mama and Walnut is good enough, just to be taken serious. And definitely, I could see them making the playoffs and things like that. But as far as like what they want to do, which is win the championship and not get knocked out in the first round like they did last year, yeah, to me, it's yet to be seen if they do need someone who could produce on the offensive end. I would like to see Peroxide step up more. I'll say that offensively, it doesn't hurt to have someone else who can put up 12 to 15 a game.
Sure, sure. But I just want to jump in before you will and say that we have to consider that yes, you need more from Peroxide, but in that second game against the Bucks, A. Rooks, formerly known as Game 6 Drake, played absolutely out of his mind. So amazing. We're not going to get games like that from individual players most weeks this season, right? So you weather some of those, especially in a series playoff format this time. I think that's a game they win if A. Rooks has even 80% of the game that he had.
Sure.
Yeah, and you talked about they lost to the Bucks twice. I mean, a win over the Warriors isn't anything to sneeze at either. I mean, the Warriors didn't have type, which I think hurt them a lot. I think if type was there to be guarding Walnut, that game would go a lot differently. I'm not saying the Blazers would lose, but it might have been a little bit closer. This was an 11-point win for them, but that's a quality win over the Warriors. So and like Josiah said, I mean, A. Rooks was just hitting insane shots. Even when he was covered, he was hitting those buzzer beaters to send it to overtime and double overtime. So, which again, I think is kind of why this is played into like, is it possible for the Blazers to be slept on? But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I mean, and also the Warriors team, they did come back and blow out the Cavs 2 games after that. So I mean,
right,
that it's
yeah.
not that Warriors team, even though they didn't have type and Chiquito was in the lineup, they still proved that they can still be a top tier type team.
Yeah, no, I mean the Warriors are a good team. So
Yeah. So I agree with that.
why don't we talk about Pistons GT? I think this was a team that surprised a lot of people in week 2. They got a big win against Bucks Gaming, who we've just talked about as one of the best teams in the league. 76-68. They beat the Bucks on Wednesday night. Jaacko was the guy, the New Zealand product, finally came in after some visa issues or the process or whatever taking so long. And he immediately comes in. He scores 21 points in his first game. How do the Pistons look with Jaacko, Josiah?
The Pistons look much improved. Jaacko is the spark that they really, really needed. I'm cautious to make prognostications about where they'll wind up in the long run. Once teams get used to Jaacko's style of play, perhaps they haven't watched as much film on him due to his playing in Australia and New Zealand Pro-Am, where he's a very good player, very versatile player too, which I think will come to light. It just transforms their entire team. You had Styles going nearly hoarse, just shouting and so excited. It's really great for them, and I'm glad Jaacko is finally over here.
Yeah. No, I
What do
mean,
you think, Len?
yeah, I definitely have to co-sign that. Jaacko proved to be that spark. I was really hard on the Pistons for the selection of Splash King, not realizing Jaacko was this good. I had conversations with him prior to the draft. As I posted on Twitter that he was adamant he just needed a chance and all that stuff, and he proved it. And it's great to see because I think the main thing with this team is the growth. They continue to get better and better and better. Week in and week out, and I think he was a spark of that. But also, some of these other guys have really matured. Coming into the league, a lot of people were skeptical about May playing on not being able to play on a 6'11" glass cleaner, and he's out here, still being just as productive on that center build. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but he's definitely, he played really good against Plondo, who's been arguably the best center to me in the league up to this point. Yeah, I mean, he's just been great. And then same with Styles. Like, the main thing I noticed about Styles is his growth, off the game in a sense. Like, seeing him screaming and being the energy for his team, I think that's going to prove vital. I question if that team had that, and him being able to step into that role, I think is going to be huge because I don't know if people remember, but he was in the 250K finals. What was it, 2 or 3 years ago? And he was like just a recluse. He didn't even want to talk to Paul George, and everyone's like, oh, imagine him on that stage, and now he's like the main voice for that team on that stage. So I think just growth all around is great for this team. I think Joseph and May have a lot of great chemistry, and that makes you think that's probably why the Pistons moved Ramo last year. They probably didn't have the best chemistry between those two, so getting May and Joseph on the same page is a win in that book. So yeah, I mean, overall, just the growth of this team, they have a lot to be optimistic about.
Yes.
Well, what if it had been Ramo and May?
Yeah, no, that would be even better. I'm just looking at
well, then who's the point guard then, right?
Yeah,
who's
that's
the point
true.
guard then?
Yeah, that's true.
You'd have to go
pick someone at 16.
Maybe, but then you don't have Ramo and May. Who do you get at 16?
Who was there at 16? I feel like there's no point guard who's productive right now to the point, that all the point guards.
I don't know. What if you retain a guy who was picked 15th?
Well, okay. I mean, really?
Yeah, we'll curtail this because it's not fair, and the Pistons.
It wasn't a bad move at the time. I don't think. No,
and you know what? I think this makes it sound like I'm selling Joseph short, which I do not intend. He's played very well, as Lance had some good chemistry there. But I think in a case of what might have been, if we just look at it from a strictly calculus sort of thing, where you look at the potential players who might have been in there, obviously it spirals, but I think it's best to accept the guys you've got and be happy with the lineup that you have.
It's maybe a conversation you can have at the end of the season, but
yep,
I mean, this week Styles, he had 18-8 in the first game, and they had 12-10 in the second game. May went out, he had 16-18 in the first game, and then 20-14 in the second game. So for now, it's not working out too bad.
Well, what I will say, in regards to the partnership, if it were Ramo and May, they both seem to be alphas. They both want to be that main center who's running pick and roll on both sides. Whereas Joseph, he ran the pick and roll, in the tip off, and was the main center in those games, and he was able to go into a more utility role. It's who knows if Ramo would be willing to do that for May. Maybe he would. I mean, you don't know, but I mean, with the speculation of it, I seeing how Joseph and May mesh, I just think it's better, better for how the scenario could have turned out,
Yeah, I mean, for now, we'll have to see how the Pistons continue now that Jaacko's in the lineup. For now, they're 1-1 with a win against a really good team and a loss against a really good team. They lost against the Pacers, of course, but yeah, we'll see how they go. Talking about, the Pistons were dead last in our power rankings last week, guys. I don't think there's going to be much of a secret as to who's going to be last in this week's. Let's talk about the Grizz. What's going on with them?
I don't want to talk about the Grizz.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
Oh man, Len, you go first.
Yeah, I mean, uh, I wouldn't say we're like extremely critical in the sense of like we're picking on them, but I mean, it is evident we made a our inaugural episode of our new Dimer playbook on YouTube now. Uh, was they were our first candidate for that, and a lot of that points to the disappointing play of Vandy to date. He's the number 7 pick, and he's just not playing like it. But I don't think it's just his fault. I don't think J Rod's playing well. I mean, the whole team, besides Authentic African, really, you can make a claim that none of them are playing up to the standards they should. But I, I I remember it was, I think it was in our last podcast episode where I had brought up maybe they need to bring in someone who's more X's and O's savvy when it comes to the coaching end, while letting,
I think we're all in agreement about
yeah,
that. I think we would all like to see
yeah,
that.
and I think it's just continuing to show. We kind of pointed out where they could have, helped Vandy in a sense in those Dimer playbook videos, but yeah, I mean, in general, I was high on. I picked this team in our preview of the entire league to make the playoffs. I think I even had them as a maybe the number 4 seed, maybe it was the 5 seed, but I was definitely high on this team. I thought Vandy would be better. I thought J Rod would be better. I thought Authentic African would be staking his claim as a potential MVP candidate, and it's just all not working out. Yeah, I mean, you guys can add to that. That's basically where I stand.
Uh, uh, yeah. Well, I think I also had the Grizz as a 4 or 5 seed in my projected playoffs. That is not looking too good right now. Um, it's just disappointing. It's really disappointing because the league is so strong, 1 through 21, that you really want a team with as much talent as the Grizz to be in that conversation. But as we said, Vandy just is looking like an extreme rookie point guard. He has not gotten adjusted to the league yet. He and J Rod have not been efficient ball handlers and distributors that the team has needed. Toxic's been playing well, but I think there's only so much he can do on a walk, and that's not to say that he couldn't improve, but it plays into the overall lack of scheme on both sides of the ball. Their defense has been pretty good, but their offense has been absolutely anemic. They need Authentic as the saving grace at center. Um, they just need more pretty much from 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5 positions in some quarters. Just very much a struggle for them not getting it done on offense, not doing quite enough on defense. They always seem to have this little like late spark, bringing it so close against the Mavs and the Lakers, but it just falls through in the end. It's very dispiriting, as we've all said. We think they need more X's and O's, more plays, more defensive schemes. Throw something unique in there. Throw something at teams that no one's ever seen before, and that's a way to get yourself situated, get yourself comfortable, get yourself doing the things that you
Well,
want to
if
do.
I could just jump in real quick, like, because do either one of you believe that there's anything that could help this team besides like obviously Vandy coming of age and him just getting used to the league, and all of a sudden he's a different point guard these next the second half of the season or whatnot, and turn this team around? Like, do they? Is the only way like. Do they make a trade or do they bring in a coach? Like, I just don't know if there's an answer for this team right now.
No,
In
no, you.
defense of hold on, huh? In defense of Vandy for a second here, I don't think he played like so awfully in week two. Like
No,
his
he didn't. He
game,
didn't.
no, his game against the Kings was like a legitimately good game. He had he had 17 points and 9 assists. He had 6 turnovers, but he shot 6 of 8, and he like finally at least looked a little bit comfortable. We've kind of written about how shaky that Kings defense might look, but I mean, I wouldn't say he's playing horribly, and I certainly don't think the offensive system does him any favors.
Right. That's certainly true. I think the system is really the thing that Len is alluding to that can really salvage the team. And in terms of Vandy, I think there are so many more ways to get him going early in the game. Make him more efficient. give him, more secure control of the ball. I think on defense they'll throw something at teams that they haven't seen. Come up with a new, you know, it's easier to say than done, but there are people who have theorized many different defensive stratagems, and I think you can adopt some of those. Throw something. 2K is such a copycat league, and if you jump outside the bubble and you find something that works for you, then teams will scramble to adjust to it. And the Grizz have just been behind the curve. They've just been following and not being creative. And if the Grizz started running horns on a third of their plays, they would score more points. If they were well practiced in it, they would just score more points, because teams have not yet had to face that kind of set so often. Right? Only a few teams really run it, and I think the Grizz have the pieces to, if it's just straight up stealing plays from the Pacers last year, or devising some of their own. I think just come up with something different, something that gets you out of your rut, that's only letting you score what I don't know how many points they're averaging a game, but
it's not a lot.
50
It's in,
or below.
I think it might be below.
I think it's below. So
yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's below 50 points per game.
Which is
you gotta
bad.
change something.
Very bad.
You can't expect the pick and roll between a rookie point guard and a center who's just getting used to. You can't expect that to be your one saving grace as it is for the Blazers. You need to throw in something new, something that changes things up a bit. You need to manufacture efficiency, not hope for it.
Yeah. One thing I found.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, do you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, because you kind of brought up a good point, not to just totally crap on Vandy the whole time. They had, a lot, and coming into this season, a lot of people were down on the Bucks on who they brought in as far as retained players. And granted, the Grizzlies weren't, them having Authentic African helped, kind of take the pressure maybe off of Universal Phenom as far as, coming into this year needing to produce, but he hasn't been talked about much at all. And I think that's kind of bad in a sense, because it's like he might be the retained player who's probably not doing much at all for their teams. Like you look at all these teams and their retained guys, they're game changers. The majority of them are game changers, and for him, even like Joseph on the Pistons, Meek on the Bucks, they're really game changers now. With him, you don't see him have, any type of big stops or hit any sort of big shots or take over in certain stretches of the game. So I just to take the pressure off Vandy a little bit. So I don't think it's just him being the point guard. You're going to get a lot of that pressure, but I've been noticing that with Universal Phenom, he's not doing much at all.
Well, that kind of ties into what I was about to say, because one thing I noticed that really piqued my interest during the broadcast was Dirk saying that for the Grizz, the 1, 2, and 5 positions are the only ones secure on the team. So obviously that includes Universal Phenom. Now, what I don't know is when he talks about the 2, is he talking about Toxic on the lock at 2, or is he talking about like J-Rod, who's naturally a 2, but because of the meta, he's being moved to the 3 on the shot creating sharpshooter. Let's assume he's saying that J-Rod's spot isn't safe, and he's saying that Universal Phenom's spot isn't safe. What do we think about that, and do we agree, and what can be done there? Because they were talking about, Scott and Dirk were talking about, maybe you bring in D-double at some point to try and just make something shake.
Yeah, for me, I've played against D-double a few times this year, and he's really not that bad on lock. If you were able to maybe move Toxic to that 4 spot, or maybe J-Rod to make him more comfortable, as he is more of a shooter rather than just a ball handler, so he can hit more of those corner shots that are probably necessary to get more offensive spacing. I don't see why you don't try it. Like we said, they're the definitive last place team in our power rankings right now. They haven't shown anything of promise really, besides a few offensive sparks that they've got from Vandy and Authentic African in late games, usually when it's too late. So yeah, I mean, I don't know why you don't try it. D-double's not a bad option. I think, yeah, I mean, there's obviously, hindsight's always 20/20. We could say, oh, since this didn't work out, they could have drafted so and so and so and so. But no, looking at their current, situation, there are different, things that they could throw out there and see if they stick.
they're not an untalented team. And when you have talent, then I think you can move some pieces around. D double I think would be a very good fill in. Either at the lock, as Lon says, or at the four if need be. Um, but if you put him in, for example, at the four, and he just stands in the corner, then it's not like there's a point to doing anything. So I think it all comes back to the scheme, um, back to just getting back in the lab, figuring something out, making more shots go in. That's what it's all about.
All right. Well, I think we're mostly in agreement about all that. So why don't we let's talk about some individual performances. Josiah, give me a player who stood out in a good way for you this week.
Wait, no, go to Len first because I haven't figured mine out yet.
Len, give me a player who stood out in a good way for you this week.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a few. I think a lot of people have already spoken about the appreciation of Rando playing point guard for the Hawks. So I'll speak about this other person who's also a point guard who was basically game planned in a sense where, hey, we don't believe this player can beat us, so let's see if he can. And that's Maddie from Pacers Gaming. When they played their matchup, I think it was against the Pistons. They basically from jump said, hey, Insanity, we're going to throw you on Swizzard, and we're going to have Styles play defense on Maddie. Let's see if this guy, belongs here. And he proved, in my opinion, he really proved he did. He had a career high 12 points, I think, already in the first quarter. Coming into this year, we all knew that this team was going to be one of the better defensive teams, and the question was always, okay, who's going to score for them offensively when they need it? And up to date, Swizzer's kind of been that player for them, and I think a lot of teams are finally taking notice. I mean, teams know of that, but now they're finally starting to game plan and say, okay, Swizzer can beat us. He's scoring 30 points, 25 points a game. So let's see if this point guard they took can do it, and he proved it that game. We'll see if he can keep it up. I think he did show some promise. The really good thing about him is that even when he seems to be struggling or something like that, he's always poised. He always seems like he's not, stressing in a sense. There are times where you see a shot and you're like, whoa, what was that? But I mean, for the most part, he's proven poised, and I think that's why they drafted him. Kind of adapted the Doza on no smoke type of formula where it's like, hey, we're gonna live and die by Wolf and Ramo and Swizzerk, and we'll have a point guard that every now and then can provide the spark, but he's always playing defense and he can communicate really well with our guys and he has high IQ. And it just seems to be working out for this team. But yeah, I just had to really shout him out because I think he's kind of been thought of like, oh, he's just riding the coattails of this great team, and it's great he's in that position with those guys. But there are going to be, if they're going to win a championship, there are going to be games where he's going to be needed like that. And I think it was a great feeling to see him step up in that scenario when the Pistons came at them with that game plan.
Yeah, he had 17 points on 7 for 11 shooting in that Pistons game. Josiah, who's a player who stood out in a good way for you this week?
I think we should talk a bit more about Jaacko because I was on the bandwagon for Jaacko from the beginning, but at the same time though, being jet lagged, outrageously jet lagged, but Jaacko coming over, making an impact right off the bat. We're sort of forgetting the fact that A, he's a rookie, B, hasn't really played with these guys too much, and C, dude put up 21 points in his first game, 12 in his second. That's very impressive, and this was a team that really needed a jolt, and he really lived up to the high expectations that were set for him, and that's very, very impressive from my perspective to come in as a rookie, as a new player in the country, new to the stage, and give the team the jolt that they needed. That's very impressive.
So you stole mine, Josiah. But it's fine. It's fine. Usually we kind of go for like an under the radar player on this. I'm just gonna go. Everyone knows about Mama, but I mean, 19 assists and 0 turnovers is something I don't think we'll ever see again. I mean, that's absolutely outrageous in how good it is, especially on this 2K, where it is very hard to go an entire game without a turnover as a point guard. And the 19 assists shows that it's not like he was just keeping the ball to himself and ISOing. He was distributing. So, I mean, that's just an impressive performance on its own. So I think that just has to be mentioned. Glenn, who is a player who disappointed you this week?
Oh man, it's hard. For this, it's not a specific player. It's a backcourt of a team, and that's the Wizards' backcourt. Uh, that game in their games. They really were getting great production out of their front court, and that game against Mavs, which was very high energy, felt like there was a lot at stake. Obviously, with Dave Fry, going against his former team, you kind of knew Dave Fry was going to perform. It was kind of seeing who in the supporting cast was going to step up, and you were expecting more Reese and JT to do that, whereas it turned out to be Gilly, and he had a career night that game. But yeah, I mean that Wizards team wins that game if the backcourt plays maybe 50% better than what they did. They just weren't. What they did. They ended up moving JT to the small forward shot sharp position, which I could see working. But then you're moving the person who's been thriving in that position to the point guard position, and it's just kind of confusing to me. And that it ended up. I wouldn't necessarily say backfiring because it wasn't really working out for them earlier in the season with JT on point guard and Reese on small forward either, but it just ended up being something that ended up working out. Reese, did he end with 10 turnovers? I'm not sure. I don't have the box score in
It
front of me, but I
was it
know
was nine. It was nine.
nine. So he was almost the first player in the league this season with 10 turnovers, and it's just that's just telling of that overall performance. I do still think Reese is a great player. I just don't know if throwing him into that much of a high stake game. It wasn't even high stakes, but just a high energy. Dave Fry really wanted to win that game. Switching point guards in that sense. If they, I, I still would like because for me, uh, JT's a great player. People may be down on him as a point guard or as a sole ball handler. I think he could still, like I tweeted, I think that he could thrive really in that small forward position. The issue is they didn't really select anyone that could take over that point guard position should he make that transition. So I mean, in that sense, I was looking at the roster. I was kind of thinking, user pick. I know he played ball handler a little bit this year. I think he even qualified at the ball at point guard position in the combine. So I wouldn't mind, putting Reese really was thriving the first week and in the tip off on that sharp position, the shot sharp position. If you put him back there, try user pick at the point guard position, and then maybe try JT on lock. I think JT could really be a game changing lock. To me, user pick hasn't really been playing that well on lock either. So I mean, with this team, their backcourt in general, I think that for me is was the biggest disappointment that week. Yeah, not much else I really could say about it. I like their personality. I like the organization as a whole. I really like what they do over there. But when it comes to playing on the court, I'd like to see them do better.
Josiah, what about you? Disappointing player?
I want to reframe the question more as guy I think can do more, and guy I know can do more, and I would like to see more out of. Strainer, Strainer as a key cog in the Cavs offense, and the Cavs had a very tough week. Strainer put up 20 as the Cavs lost. He put up 20 in two games combined, two losses, one against the Warriors, and the other against the Pacers. And admittedly, those are teams with amazing, amazing lockdown defenders. Whether or not those locks are playing on-ball defense against you or not, they still improve the overall defensive caliber of the team. But Strainer, I think he can just do more. He's such an important part in their scheme. He's been so good at the three all season, right from the tip-off. That I think the Cavs rely on him to do a lot of their scoring, and I've come to expect that out of him. So it's again, he's a rookie. He's continuing to grow. The Cavs are continuing to figure out their offense as a team. But I think he's just someone who has the ability to put up more points than that, and I think he'll come back and do that in forthcoming weeks.
If I could ask or like butt in here, and yeah, that as you said, they do put a lot of burden on him to be that offensive, production for that team. Uh, does that make you look at like a pro at all?
I consider like bro had a better week this week. I think better efficiency. Still has some turnover considerations, but I thought he was a little more aggressive. Definitely like bro is someone who should not be given a free pass. But I think the Cavs are going to be a team that really starts deploying some plays. Former G League coach, video coordinator Austin Peterson is their head coach. I think they're going to break out some interesting plays, some interesting schemes and systems, and I think Lega Pro will fit really well into there. But he hasn't set the bar quite as high as Strainer has so far this season, and that's why Strainer, gets the nod of approbation and consideration.
Sure, sure.
So I'm going to go with control here. The Lakers started the season out running Vert at point guard and control at lock, which I think confused, or maybe confused is maybe there's a negative connotation that comes with that, but at the very least surprised by such a move. And so everyone was kind of clamoring, put control at point guard because the Vert thing, I feel like it wasn't working. And finally they put control at point guard, and I don't think he played well enough. I think this team, the Lakers, are kind of a team that needs an aggressive scorer at point guard. Not every team needs a point guard like that, but I certainly think that the Lakers are one of those teams. And he just wasn't that this week. And if we kind of saw this last year, I think with control as well, where he tried to be that guy, and it kind of came with mixed results. So we'll see if he can adjust to that. So some news broke today as we were recording this from us at Dimer that the trade window, the in-season trade window, has been determined April 28th to June 16th, was it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
To be finalized, but that's the decision.
Right. So obviously we have to talk about what are some potential moves that you would like to see, Josiah?
I think without getting into too many specifics here, I think you look at sort of what a team needs and where they might be able to find that. So you look at a team that we just discussed, the Wizards. You say, well, they really need a secondary scorer or even a ball handler, really, because JT has been slow to adjust to season 2 so far. Reese, obviously, an untenable 9 turnovers in his first game at point guard, even though he cut that down a bit for game 2. And then you have to try and connect the dots and figure out a team that has an excess of scoring, and a team that would be willing to trade. And I think there are not so many destinations around the league that meet those criteria for the Wizards as a trade partner, but one stands out in particular. Look at a guy like Ball like Seam. I think I want to make it clear that I'm not saying that you're gonna hear news tomorrow that Ball like Seam is being traded to the Wizards. I want to make that very clear. But I think Ball like Seam, who's very much a secondary ball handler and continues to be so as BP establishes and asserts himself in Sacramento. Seam is a guy that I think would fit really well in the Wizards lineup, and might not be the priciest guy to acquire depending on what the Kings are asking for him. So it's really about connecting the dots between what teams need and if such a player is available elsewhere.
So, let's just, you kind of tried to say this, but let's just make this clear. This isn't based on anything we've heard. This is just what we maybe would like to see.
Yeah.
So, in that case, who do you think would be the guy who would be shipped off from the Wizards then?
Well, I think it depends on the value. How much do the Kings value Seam? I think the Wizards seem to be perfectly happy getting Gilly back into the lineup. I think Paul B is sort of the obvious guy right off the bat to consider setting the other way. Maybe they start out with an offer like that, and then the Kings come back and say, no, actually, we want someone who's got experience playing on a lock. We're not thrilled with
There's no
how
way the Kings would take Paul B
I
for
I'm
Bollig
working through
Seam.
The negotiation phase here.
I'm not saying anything against Paul B, but that
No, right. And so the Kings come back and say no, but you have someone who has been, who has played on a lock. He's racking up some steals per game, and you know, our lock, our best lock is suspended, and our the guy we've got playing lock, he's good, but we're not sure if he's the long term answer. And so they say, oh, maybe we want a guy like user pick. So is that a trade? Seam for user pick was get offense, Kings get some defense. Now for the Kings, what I'm worried about there is how do you replace that secondary scoring? Do you trust Roman or Yusuf Scarbs maybe to shift down to the three? And for the Wizards, I think you'd have to consider, would maybe, can we acclimate Reese to point guard quickly, or will here JT play lock? But I think that would definitely cure some of their offensive woes. And I think if the Kings would not be displeased to get a guy like user pick, they might be displeased to give up a guy like Pollock.
yeah, yeah, that'd be an interesting one. Len, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, so I kind of want to talk about the Kings a little bit too. Obviously, they've kind of been the in the spotlight as far as speculation goes for when this trade window opens. A lot of people are speculating they'd be a team that would, more than likely be, make a move when that window does open. But then it's like you look at these scenarios, and even the scenario that Josiah just hit on, it just doesn't make sense to me that they would move Seam to bring in another lockdown, and they drafted three of those to replace Timely for the year, and none of them have been able to do that to date. And so then you bring in another one. I don't know, just this whole Kings team. I think they do have assets that could provide value, but it just doesn't make sense like obviously with the report of VP wanting out and not really knowing definitively where that stands right now. Obviously they would want something in return. Who he's the highest scoring point guard or highest scoring rookie right now. So I mean, obviously he's on the court. He's a talent that's amazing. But what are you going to get in return that maybe is maybe not producing as much on the court, but more fit off the court? And are they willing to do that? Are they willing to take more of the okay? Maybe we can figure this out because guys get together, more, get along better off the court. Or and the same thing goes for Seam. What can we move for Seam? But I mean, Seam and BP really have been the bright spot for that team. Colt plays, he hasn't been as good as he was last year to me, but I mean, he's still, a premier center. He could still be really good for that team. I think the question for that team comes to the defense. So yeah, I mean, so that's where this whole scenario of trades comes to. Whereas I look like at a team like Atlanta, who maybe has been getting better production than they thought they would from Rando at the point guard position. And it's not to say that Rando can't play that position, but if we're thinking of championships rather than just hoping we aren't the first pick in the next year, we have to be looking at solutions to, maximize each position. And Rando at point guard, I wouldn't necessarily say is the best solution for that. And I don't think Atlanta thinks that either. So it makes you wonder, okay, whereas Kings drafted three lockdowns, Atlanta drafted, Dev Goss and Rando at the sharpshooting position. I think it's pretty evident that Rando has been the more productive for that team. So maybe shop Dev Goss and see what you could get, maybe to get a point guard in return. I know I was kind of speculating that maybe, Pistons might be interested in taking on someone like Dev Goss to pair with Insanity, as they're both friends and would have a better on-court chemistry. But that was prior to how the Pistons played this week. I think, who wants to break that team up? They seem to be getting better and better and better. So why would you want to move Styles? Because I know Styles and Rando would have great chemistry too. and I think that would work in favor of the Hawks. But like I said, at this point, I just don't see why the Pistons would want to blow up what they have. I think we could look at quite a few teams where we say, hey, this team could you like even Utah, for instance, where they have compete who maybe um, Moam, Easy Money, was some know him as. He played really well this week on the sharp position. Uh, but still, it wasn't enough to pull them out of the holes. Maybe they need someone to bring in there who can play kind of like a more of like a off-ball guard position rather than just a full sharp position to help compete in that aspect. So maybe if they were able to flip Moam for a guard, maybe like Peroxide or someone like that who could play more of like a ball handling position. Because also Peroxide, as we were saying, he's kind of been underwhelming in Portland too. Maybe if he was to go to Utah, he could thrive, a little bit more, taking on more of the responsibility of the offense rather than just watching Mama and Walnut run the pick and roll, and whenever you're needed, they'll call your name kind of thing. So there's a couple scenarios I could see happening, but I mean, as far as something where it's like I could definitively see this. Yeah, there's teams that have gaps. There's teams that didn't really draft well, but yeah, I mean that's kind of where I stand with it. There's a lot that I'd like to see teams do, but I just don't know where organizations stand as far as saying like, yeah, let's blow this up just because this player is a kind of an issue off the court, or this person put in a trade request, so let's blow this up. I just don't know how those teams stand. So yeah.
Yeah, it's really tricky because we're early into the season, so the trade window doesn't open for another week at this point. So you have at least a little more time to kind of take stock of what you have, and what else was I gonna say? It like pulling off these 1-for-1 trades is really tricky in itself. So you kind of it's hard to come out like dead even in one of these things when you consider that you have to go 1-for-1 and there's no way to include a pick in any of these trades. So it's going to be tough. One I would look at is I would wonder if the Lakers don't want to try and snatch up a more true point guard. And trying to think of guys they could trade. If you want someone, I think of value, I think maybe you would start at Vert, who has played well, but maybe you can shift control back to the lock and ship Vert off for, I don't know. I mean, even like you just talked about the Hawks just now, Len. What about like a Vert for a Jay of Fool trade, where Jay of Fool gets to move back to point guard and Vert can stick to that lockdown position on the Hawks? I'm kind of looking at that,
Yeah.
where like maybe not completely even, but at the very least like mutually beneficial. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So the Lakers going for a point guard, I think, would be one of my things, assuming that control doesn't kind of pick it up here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, yeah, and so when you talk in that sense, I mean, there are potential scenarios I could see. I think that would work in the sense of like, yeah, Vert's a great player, Jay's a great player. Um, I would just, if I was Atlanta, Jay would be one of the players I would not want to move. He seems like the best option at lockdown for them. Well, obviously, Shots could play that position as well, but I think Shots has provided so much on that post score for their offense that kind of has a deficient backcourt, uh, that he could take some of that pressure off of them. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it'll be interesting to say the least, because I think that we could see some moves, because like we said, we don't really get to see the side of what's going on off the court if they feel.
There will be moves.
Yeah,
There will be moves
yeah.
for sure.
It's just seeing like
There will be moves.
yeah, it's just seeing like where my main issue is I just don't know where teams stand as far as like uh, even with the Kings, like BP's such a talent that it's like, okay, yeah, I know I keep repeating this, but why would we? Is it worth taking the risk of bringing in someone off the court who's better off the court for the team? Who knows?
Right. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, we can't really take that into consideration. Like we only, us sitting, here at home, we can only kind of consider the on the court
For sure.
implications of everything.
Yeah,
We don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
for sure, for sure.
So
Yeah,
that definitely
and
makes
I
it a
think
lot more
that
difficult.
I think that in terms of value requested in return, BP is not going to be at the door on April 28th. There's a lot of value, especially with the way he's playing and the numbers he's putting up. There's going to be a lot of value being requested in return by the Kings, and he is not getting traded at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, because for me, if I was in that scenario, I would think of, what could we do to make our scenario better, to make him more comfortable since he is such a talented player. And maybe, talk with him and say, what do you think we could do to better, your surroundings here, kind of thing. Because he is a franchise talent. So rather than just giving that up, as we've seen sometimes in the NBA where, a player's not satisfied like Kobe was with the Lakers. They rather than let him go and just say, "Oh, okay, we don't want to deal with it." They say, "Okay, how can we bring in people who could better, suit your skill set and who you are as a person and player."
Yeah. So there's going to be some surprises, I think, because there's probably quite a bit that we don't know of what's going on and how things. The trade window is over a month long, so that's quite a few games that teams will be able to play, and things will sort of start to take a little bit more shape. We're 2 weeks into the season. Teams have played 4 games at most, so there's a lot more. As things go along, I think we may get a clearer picture of like people who may need to be moved and what various team needs are and things like that. So it's there's probably definitely going to be some trades though, and we'll have to see how it works out in season. It's going to be tough. Any other trade ideas though?
Let's save him for the article.
Yeah, we'll write an article with more concrete ideas, I think. So let's talk just a quick little bit about week 3. Josiah, give me a matchup that you're really looking forward to.
I think there are a lot of really good matchups, but how can you not just pinpoint the Celtics 76ers right off the bat? Fab suspended, rematch of the tip-off finals, Radiant, Steez, Profusion. It's a great matchup, great storylines. And, even if the 76ers blow the pants off the Celtics as they did last time the two teams met, and, Fab's not even going to be out there this time, it's still a great storyline. And still, Boston, Philadelphia, still a great rivalry.
Okay. Even without Fab, you're going with that.
You know what? Maybe we'll see an on-the-spot Ewing theory, as per Bill Simmons, where losing a star gives you a jolt and a brief boost for a little while. What if Suave turns out to be amazing?
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, could be. Len, what's a matchup you're looking forward to?
Yeah. So I'll kind of ride the Celtics right here and say the Celtics versus Kingsguard in the Celtics' second game. That'll be the Kings' first game of the week. Yeah, I'm just interested to see this Kings team. I know they beat the Grizzlies, they blew them out, but they seem to be a team who's like tinkering on figuring it out and not figuring it out. So I just like the storyline of this game where they're kind of in that position where they still believe that they could prove some people wrong while people are still down on them. And then we also have the Celtics where Fab will come back in that game. It'll be interesting to see if he'll provide like a, sort of Bobby Boucher at halftime type of spark where he comes in and comes back in and this team just looks like the tip-off finalists that we saw in that tip-off tournament at the beginning of the year. So yeah, I mean, there's probably one of the more. I mean, there's a few interesting games, but I think with that one, just with the suspension looming and stuff like that, I'll definitely be tuned in for this game.
Yeah, that Fab BP matchup I think is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm going to go with the Heat versus the Mavs. I'm mostly interested in this game because the Mavs are 3-0. I'm not entirely sold on their performances yet. They have two wins over the Grizz, which was a very, very, very nervy win. They held the Grizz to 4 points in the first quarter and still only won the game by 1 point. And then they beat the Wizards. And, that win over the Jazz, maybe, I don't want to say the Jazz are, it's hard to tell at this point. So I think their matchup against the Heat is kind of their first true test of, are these guys legit, or are they just the benefactors of an easier schedule to start things out? Because the Heat are always a tough matchup no matter what team you are. So very interested to see that and see how Jay Money matches up against Dimes. So
Yeah, just to say, the combined record of their three of the Mavs opponents is 1-8 currently. So just to say how their
yeah,
schedule has been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
So
Good point. Yeah, that's not something where you say, "Oh, I'm sold. This team's going all the way." And also, just not that history has any effect now, but the Mavs were also 5-2 to start last year and finished 6-8. So history repeats itself. It doesn't necessarily have a bearing on the present, and the Mavs certainly want to forge a new path with their new team.
yeah, so that's why I picked that one. I think it's going to be very interesting. Well, I think that's it for our podcast. Got some good discussion of week 2. Looked a bit at week 3. Josiah, tell the people, where can they find you in all of your content?
You can find me wondering about why the Grizz have not done well on Twitter at Josiah Cohen 13, and you can find my written musings on dimer2k.com.
Len, where can the people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Len, LEN_2K. Usually during the games, I'll write some, blurb type commentary in regards to my thoughts and things of that sort while the games are going on. And then, I've written a few articles on Dimer2K in regards to the league as well.
Yeah, and you can find me at Will Beverina. That's Beverina. And you can follow Dimer at Dimer2K. But if you're listening to this podcast and you don't follow Dimer, then what are you doing? We've been putting out a lot of content lately, to be quite honest with you. We're doing weekly previews, power rankings, videos now. We have a video. We have a YouTube channel. Search for Dimer. We just put out our first video of the Dimer playbook. And I think we're going to have more of those out this week. So definitely check that out. And it was good to finally sit down again and do this. So thanks everyone for listening. No matter whether you just listen to the end or listen to the entire thing, we always appreciate the support. And we will most certainly see you next week to talk about week 3. See you then.